Boston today is one of the most historic cities in the United States, known for its colonial architecture, academic institutions, and its central role in the birth of a nation. But in the year 1700, Boston was still a small colonial town on the edge of a vast and largely unknown continent. The settlement stood on a narrow peninsula surrounded by water and marshes, connected to the mainland by a thin strip of land known as the Boston Neck. From this modest geographic position, Boston would grow into one of the most influential cities in early American history. To understand Boston in 1700, we must return to the early days of English colonization in North America, when a small group of settlers crossed the Atlantic in search of religious freedom and new opportunities in the New World. The story of Boston began in 1630, when a fleet of ships known as the Winthrop Fleet arrived in Massachusetts Bay carrying hundreds of Puritan settlers. These colonists were not simply looking for land or wealth. They were seeking to build what they believed would be a model Christian society, a community governed by strict moral laws and religious principles. Under the leadership of John Winthrop, the settlers chose the Shawmut Peninsula as the site for their new town. The location offered natural protection from the sea, access to freshwater springs, and a deep harbor that could accommodate ships arriving from England. The town was named Boston after a city in Lincolnshire, England, from which many of the settlers had originated. In its earliest years, Boston was a small cluster of wooden houses built along narrow dirt paths. The buildings were simple, constructed from timber and local materials, with steep roofs designed to shed rain and snow. At the center of the town stood the meeting house, the most important building in Puritan society. This was where residents gathered for religious services, community meetings, and political decisions. In Puritan Boston, religion and government were deeply connected, and church leaders held enormous influence over daily life. By the year 1700, Boston had grown into the largest town in the English colonies of North America. Its population was estimated to be around 7,000 people, a significant number for the time. Despite its relatively small size by modern standards, Boston was already a bustling port town. Ships arrived regularly carrying goods from England, the Caribbean, and other parts of the Atlantic world. Merchants traded fish, timber, furs, and agricultural products in exchange for manufactured goods, textiles, and tools from Europe. The harbor was the lifeline of the town. From the wharves along the waterfront, sailors loaded barrels of salted cod, one of the region's most valuable exports. New England's cold waters were rich in fish, and Boston merchants built a thriving economy around the Atlantic fishing trade. Cod from New England was shipped to Europe and the Caribbean, where it became a staple food for plantation workers and urban populations alike. This trade connected Boston to a vast network of commerce stretching across the ocean. Walking through the streets of Boston in 1700, a visitor would see a town that was both orderly and crowded. The narrow lanes wound between rows of wooden houses, workshops, taverns, and small marketplaces. Many buildings leaned slightly over the streets, their upper floors extending outward in a style inherited from medieval England. Chimneys rose above the rooftops, and the smell of wood smoke often filled the air, especially during the long New England winters. Daily life in Boston revolved around work, religion, and community. Most residents were artisans, fishermen, merchants, or farmers who lived on small plots of land just outside the town center. Blacksmiths hammered iron tools and horseshoes. Coopers crafted wooden barrels for shipping goods, and shipwrights worked along the waterfront building and repairing vessels. The shipbuilding industry would become one of Boston's most important economic activities in the coming decades. Education was also a defining feature of Boston society. The Puritans placed a strong emphasis on literacy, believing that every person should be able to read the Bible. As a result, Boston established one of the first public school systems in the American colonies. In 1635, the town founded the Boston Latin School, which still exists today and is considered the oldest public school in the United States. Students there studied classical languages, religion, and philosophy, preparing some of them for further education at Harvard College, which had been founded nearby in Cambridge in 1636. Despite its religious ideals, Boston in 1700 was not a place of complete harmony. The strict moral codes of Puritan society often led to tensions and conflicts within the community. Authorities enforced laws against behaviors considered sinful, including gambling, drunkenness, and religious dissent. Those who challenged Puritan authority sometimes faced banishment or punishment. Earlier in the century, figures like Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams had been expelled from Massachusetts for questioning the colony's religious leadership. Boston was also shaped by its relationship with the indigenous peoples of the region. Before the arrival of English settlers, the land around Massachusetts Bay had been home to Native American communities for thousands of years. Disease brought by European contact had already devastated many of these populations before Boston was founded. But conflicts between colonists and indigenous groups continued throughout the 17th century. One of the most violent episodes was King Philip's War in the 1670s, a devastating conflict that reshaped the balance of power in New England and left deep scars on both sides. By 1700, the immediate threat of large-scale conflict had subsided, allowing Boston to focus more fully on trade and expansion. The town's merchants were becoming increasingly wealthy, and Boston was emerging as a major center of commerce in the Atlantic world. Warehouses lined the harbor, storing goods waiting to be shipped across the ocean. Taverns and inns welcomed sailors and travelers arriving from distant ports. News from Europe, sometimes months old, circulated through the town, connecting Boston to global events. The physical landscape of Boston was also beginning to change. The town's population growth placed pressure on the limited land available on the peninsula. Over time, residents began filling in marshes and shallow coastal areas to create more space for buildings and streets. This process of land reclamation would continue for centuries, eventually transforming Boston's geography far beyond its original boundaries. In 1700, however, the town still retained much of its early colonial character. From a distance, Boston would have appeared as a compact settlement of wooden structures clustered along the harbor, with church steeples rising above the rooftops. Dirt roads connected the town to nearby villages and farms, while ships anchored in the harbor created a forest of masts against the skyline. The rhythm of life was governed by the seasons, the tides, and the strict religious calendar of the Puritan community. Yet beneath its quiet appearance, Boston was already developing the political and economic energy that would later make it famous. In the decades following 1700, tensions between the American colonies and the British Crown would begin to grow. Boston's merchants, printers, and political thinkers would play a central role in shaping colonial resistance to imperial authority. Events such as the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party were still many years away, but the foundations for those revolutionary moments were already being laid in the town's streets, taverns, and meeting halls. Boston in 1700 was therefore more than just a colonial settlement. It was a growing port, a center of religious life, a place of education and trade, and a community shaped by the ambitions and beliefs of its inhabitants. From a small Puritan town built on a narrow peninsula, Boston would eventually become one of the most influential cities in the history of the United States. Its streets, harbor, and institutions formed the early framework of a city that would soon stand at the heart of a revolution that changed the course of world history.